So this happened 7 months ago. I was visiting San Diego for job interviews and staying at my favorite hotel in Serrano Mesa. For background, I'm a 40-year-old man and I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6'1" and a former strip club bouncer. Now, onto the weirdness. On my third night, I was up pretty late hanging out with some old friends after my interviews. I got back to the hotel around 2 a.m. with some Sunny's donuts. After eating a few, drinking a few more, and watching South Park post-COVID, I decided to smoke before I went to bed. This made it now around 3 a.m. So I go downstairs, walk out front to the smoking area by the fountain, but there's another couple who's also staying at the hotel already there. I didn't want to impose, so I decided to just walk around the outside parts of the hotel while I smoked. I walked around the pool, the barbecue area, the basketball courts, then started back for the side door. As I did, a black sedan drove up alongside me and stopped. The window rolled down, and a tiny Asian woman asked if I knew how to get out of the parking lot and back onto the street. Now, from where we were when she asked me, this was literally a straight line about 150 feet in front of her. So I thought she was drunk or just blind. So I politely said yes, just keep going straight and turn left at the tree. She then asked me if I could get in the car and show her. Now, again, I'm a former strip club bouncer, and this woman looked very much like a Walmart Ali Wong. There was absolutely no intimidation factor, but for some reason, I instantly felt uneasy. Again, it was literally right in front of her. She could see the road. Also, the windows were tinted far more than they should have been, and honestly, I couldn't tell if anyone else was in the car. I used the smoking as an excuse not to get in the car, but she said she didn't mind and gave me a very creepy smile. I politely declined again and pointed out that the road was literally right there, so I'd just be walking back in 5 seconds anyway. She asked me again if I would get in and show her. This was feeling like a weird kid ice cream truck situation. I mean, guys, how often do decently looking women just drive up to you and ask you to get in their car at 3 a.m. in a hotel parking lot? How often does anyone ask a big bearded guy to hop in their car under these circumstances? Nothing about this was right. Again, I politely declined as I finished my smoke, and was luckily already standing right next to the hotel sliding door when all this started, so I just went in. The woman just drove off as she rolled up her window, right exactly to the exit she had asked me to show her. I told the front desk about it, and they said that they'll keep an eye out, but I'm quite sure nothing was ever done or came of it. Just one of those things that really makes me wonder, what the hell did she want me to get in her car so badly for? A pretty man I am not, so it had to be some kind of scam. I just wonder exactly how much danger I was in. It was about 10 p.m. and I was staying at a hotel in downtown Chicago, right by Lower Wacker Drive. I had just gotten an Uber Eats delivery because they weren't going to do room service because of COVID. Potbellies. Important later. I was listening to music, but I had my hood up because it was freezing. I was smoking and this guy walked up to me and asked me for a few cigarettes. I gave him one, and my lighter to use. Come on, you can give me more than that. I thought if I just gave him another cigarette, he would leave me alone, so I gave him another one. I expected him to say thank you, give my lighter back, and leave. He didn't do any of those things. He was standing right in front of me, and I started to get anxious. I moved back, and I'm essentially against the window for the area where you check in. He just kept standing there, and then noticed my bag of food. Can you give me some of your food? I told him that I was sorry, but it was just a sandwich and soup because my husband ordered food from a different restaurant. Well, at least give me half of your sandwich then. I apologized again and said no. Then he started getting closer to me. I realized I needed to get away, but he was blocking me. Dude, give me my lighter back. I thought I needed to pretend that I wasn't freaking out. I put my cigarette out and put it back in the pack. I don't have any food, and I could freeze to death. I'm sorry you don't have any food. I don't know what else to say. I didn't want to say, hey, you're You're wearing a really nice looking coat and fancy sneakers. So give me some of your food then. He was right up in my face and I was scared because he seemed to be getting more angry. I'm sorry, I can't. Please move. Yes, you fucking can. At this point, I was terrified that he was gonna hit me or something, so I banged on the window, and the people from the check-in desk ignored me. He got really angry. What the fuck, bitch? Then, like a miracle, my mom called and I answered. I had my headphones on that he didn't see. I started crying hysterically and started saying, Mom, thank God. Oh my God, this guy won't leave me alone. My mom told me to do anything to get away. At that moment, the guy stepped back and looked around. There was no one around, but I took advantage of him being distracted and pushed past him and ran inside. I cried so hard I could barely get the words out. I was so scared, and I realized because I tried to get help and nothing happened, if my mom hadn't called me, I don't know what would have happened. Later, I thought even if I gave him the soup, it would have been like when I gave him the cigarette, and it wasn't enough. I did go back down for a cigarette later, but I stayed by the revolving door. This woman was also smoking, and I told her what happened. She showed me her mace and said that all women should have it. My mom passed away on February 13th, 2023. This happened a year or more before that. I'm a 23-year-old female. My best friend and I, 21 female, went to our hostel in Poland and could not get the door open even though we had the code. These two men that claimed that they were staying there offered to help us, but we could not get in until someone else came out of the building. At first, these guys were nice and helped us carry our luggage up the stairs to the hostel. Surprisingly, there was no one at the check-in desk, even though the owner specifically asked that we check in at this time. Because we already knew what room we were supposed to be in, the two guys helped show us to our room, and we all made pleasant introductions. They were 32 and 33, if I remember correctly, and we let them know our age. They left us to get settled. But we realized at this point that without being able to check in, we did not have the keys to enter the building or even lock our door. Now here's where things get weird. We were already feeling a bit sketched out about the situation, as it was clear that the hostel was just a converted apartment. But that's what you get for 10 euros a night, I guess. We then hear a brief knock at our door, and without waiting for a reply, these two dudes come back into our room to talk. I think. The younger one of the two starts talking to us about going out that night, and asks more questions about us. And at this point, my friend and I are exchanging looks. He mentions that he thinks I'm the one in charge because my friend looks young, then proceeds to stroke his hand down her cheek. But wait, it gets better. He then reveals to us that he just did some cocaine and proceeds to offer us some, which we both adamantly decline. At this point, I just wanted him out of my room so we could have a chance to think, and this man did not want to leave. I finally backed him towards the door, but he wouldn't move his body so I could close the door all the way, and kept talking to us, even though I was trying to gently shove him out. I finally got the door closed, and then used my body to hold it shut. At this point, my friend had tried to call the owner multiple times to no avail, so we decided to book another hostel and leave. We waited until we heard the guys leave and booked it out of there to our new hostel, and are in the process of getting a refund since we booked and paid the fee online. So creepy hostel men, let's please never meet again. To give some context, I've been homeless with my mom and her emotional support animal for the last few months. When we first became homeless, it was my first year of college. Where I live, college is free for the first 2 years, and my college, after I gave them an explanation, gave me and my mom a hotel room for a few weeks. The hotel room was fine, nothing special, but was probably better than most considering it was like $170 per night. About 2 days into our stay, we went downstairs to do laundry, but the washers in the hotel were too expensive for us, so I texted her and was waiting by it for her to pull up the car so we could go to the laundromat instead. While I was waiting, I was on my phone, so I didn't notice my mom pull up, and she yelled at me to hurry up and get in the car. While I grabbed the dog and my clothes, I noticed that she was talking to a man 2 doors down from our room. Our room was on the second floor, so I thought it was weird that she started a conversation from the car to someone upstairs. So when I got in the car, I asked her what it was about. She proceeded to tell me that after she yelled at me to hurry up, he responded to her that he'd be down in a minute. So she was explaining to him that she was talking to me. We both thought it was weird that he responded like that to her, but we brushed it off that maybe he was waiting for someone from Uber or something. That was until we got back to see his door slightly open and him just staring out of it with just his face. I tried to brush it off again because I thought maybe he was still waiting for his Uber or Lyft or something, because he had everything in his room turned off and it was still quite cold out in the beginning of spring. I would see this man staring out of his room with all his lights off periodically about half the time I left or was coming back to the room. My mom, who is a heavy smoker, would get scared by the man staring at her and would come back inside the room early. So throughout our stay, we tried our best to avoid the man if we could. If he had his door open, we went back inside. If we went outside or got back from somewhere and he was staring, we would avoid eye contact. A little later that night, I went out to the car for something and saw a couple sitting on the stairs talking about something, but I didn't think much of it. Later that night, it was probably about 3 in the morning. I was gaming with friends and my mom was watching TV. We're both night owls. When all of a sudden our dog starts barking at the door. We thought it was weird since she had never just barked randomly at the door, only really barked when she wanted food we were eating, or when she wanted to play. I grabbed her and put her in my lap, petting her while I played to calm down. Her barking at the door became something she did often during our stay, and it almost was exclusively at night, within the hours of 2 to 7 a.m. We didn't figure out what she was barking at until the end of our stay at that hotel. Our last day there, we saw that couple moving out of the room. Turned out they were right next to us, and my mom got to talking with them while I was putting my stuff in the car. It turned out that the couple was moving rooms because the man from 2 doors down was harassing people, knocking on their doors and singing to women through their doors late at night. Our dog was more than likely barking at this man whenever he approached our room, as one night we were woken by the sounds like a knock before our dog started barking. But by the time I checked the door, there was no one there. He was probably trying to do the similar thing that he had done to this couple, and with him staring out the door, he was more than likely mentally unwell. And while I hope he gets the help he needs, I also hope he doesn't do something potentially harmful to anyone else who ended up in the rooms next to him. This story takes place about 5 days ago. I'm still shaken up over it. I'm a 19-year-old female, and my parents and I packed up our U-Haul and made the long drive to our new home up north from our small and dinky apartments in Central Florida. I can't lie, I was very excited about this move. Attending college in the spring, finally getting to start my dream career. So many other things I couldn't or didn't get to do in Florida. On the first night of our drive, we stopped at a hotel in what appeared to be a shady area. It was kind of scary as it was set up right next to a closed down gas station with boards and graffiti written all over them. From my parents' experience and what I've seen on TV, these aren't the type of places you want to be lurking around in. My dad, who is usually very calm and collected, was on edge the whole night since the door to our room didn't close all the way. We had to prop one of the hotel chairs against it and use a deadbolt to have the slightest bit of comfort. I thought it couldn't get much worse than that, but I was so wrong. The second night, we stopped in a small town in North Carolina. We had our 2 cats with us, so we had to find a hotel that was pet-friendly. We came across one of these hotels and booked a room for the night. While my parents were making sure that nothing shifted in the U-Haul, I sat in the passenger seat of my mom's car with my little buddy, trying to calm him down. He seemed a little more agitated than normal. About an hour and a half after pulling into the parking lot, we grabbed the cats and our essentials. Emotions were running high, so we were all on edge of getting to our new home in the next day or two, depending on the amount of sleep we got. We loaded our things into a cart and approached the hotel's side door. My mom pulled out the key card, and it took a while for the door to finally unlock, but the second we heard it click, a woman started yelling at us. We looked up and saw her frantically running towards us. Her voice was frantic. The panic in her voice still sends shivers down my spine every time I think about it. She wore a long, dark blue jacket. Her hair was in a messy ponytail, and it was tucked inside her hoodie. She either looked really tired, like she hadn't slept in a year, or she had gone through something horrible. She was panting, muttering the words, "Call 911, call 911. There's something wrong with my baby." There was no child with her, nor did we see any kids in sight. My initial thought that maybe the kid was near the front of the building and was seriously hurt, or there was a car accident and we were too busy unloading to hear the collision. The woman kept telling us to call 911, but my mom told her that she didn't have her phone on her. I always carry mine, and me being a kind-hearted person I try to be, I offered to call for her. But the moment I pulled up my phone, my dad snatched it out of my hand. The lady then said, "It's really bad. You need to come see." My mom told her that we didn't want to see, and that she should go inside so the lady could go to the front desk to get help. At first, she was screaming, No, I don't need their help, I need your help." But my mom kept insisting that they go inside. At this point, my little buddy was whining and clawing at his pet carrier, trying either to get out or to attack this lady. My boy might look like a sweet fuzzball, but if provoked, he's a scratching machine. The lady took one look at him and attempted to reach for him, saying, Yeah, let's get the babies inside." The way she said that was fucking creepy. This time, it sounded like she was on drugs or had bad intentions. I scooped my cat away before she could touch him, and we led her to the front desk, where she told the hotel worker the same story she told us. The hotel worker tried to calm her down, and while the lady was distracted, my parents and I walked towards the elevator and started to get inside. As I looked back at the lobby, I saw the woman staring at us, her eyes full of anger now. She then started charging at us, and before I even had a chance to react, my mom pushed me and my furry baby into the elevator, them standing in front to protect me. I could see the woman still running towards us as the elevator was closing. I remember the small screen near the elevator in the lobby showing which floor the elevator was heading to. So to stop this crazy lady from harassing us, we pushed all the floor buttons, and we just stopped on every floor. First the second, the third, the fourth, then the fifth. After the fifth floor, we pushed the button back to our original floor and quickly piled into our room. Silence. My heart was pounding the entire time. My body started shaking at what just happened. As I got that cat out of the carrier, I heard my mom and dad talking about the lady. My dad suspected that maybe she had a mental illness or was on drugs, whereas my mom thought she could be a trafficker with the way she was trying to get us to come with her to see the supposed situation. That's when my heart broke. I try so hard to see good in people, but at the same time, I tried to keep the best distance I can. But this was the first time someone ever approached me. I was so gullible to almost believe her story. My guard had slipped. I tried to hold back my guilt and fear as best as I could, but I ended up breaking down. My mom hugged me, saying everything was going to be okay, but no matter how many times she said that, my body continued shaking and my paranoia lasted throughout the night. Even at the slightest creak, I would shoot up from the bed and look at the people thinking that the lady had found us. Luckily, she wasn't there. That night, we all decided that we were going to get up around sunrise and reach our home before nightfall. No more hotel stops, no more creepy people, and no more shady areas. As we checked out the next morning, the same employee from last night was there, and we asked her what happened after we had gotten into the elevator. The worker told us after that the crazy lady left in a huff, her hands clenched into a fist. But then the worker revealed a detail that my mind keeps going back to. When she turned to go after us, she saw a syringe in the crazy lady's jean pocket. I don't know if she already used it or was planning to use it on me and my family. It makes me wonder what the outcome would have been had my parents not been there, and if I had given the lady my phone instead of offering to call for her. Would she have sold me into trafficking? Would she have robbed us while we were injected with whatever she was on? Anyway, we made it to her home 2 days ago, but the fear of that night still eats away at me. It goes to show no matter how panicked and frightened someone may sound or act, you truly don't know if they're in genuine trouble or if they have bad intentions after gaining a random stranger's trust. Please be careful out there, guys. I, unfortunately, had to learn it the hard way that not everyone in this world is a good person. I'm just happy to still be alive and safe. I hope I never see that crazy lady again. So this took place about 4 years ago, but I still think about it and wonder. I googled the name of the farm to see if my bad vibes were accurate. It started with me going upstate to go horseback riding and chilling. Our kids were with their grandparents, and my husband had a fishing trip, so I decided to rent a car and indulge in my favorite hobby, horses. I had not been away on a solo trip for years and was looking forward to it. I found an Airbnb glamping place that had excellent reviews, nice tents, and horses on the farm. People raved about the married couple who ran it. I booked it and drove up there. The weirdness started as soon as I showed up. There was just something wrong. The wife wasn't around and the husband seemed out of it. I got into my tent and slept, since I was late. Slept fine, but a bit uncomfortable. There didn't seem to be many people around. When I came in for breakfast to the main house, the husband, mid-60s, and the exchange student worker, mid-20s, were making breakfast for a handful of guests. I was late again and ended up alone with just the two of them. Over the following hour, he explained to me how his wife had left him and how he was now a shattered man, and that he had been forced to take up a relationship with an exchange student worker. He told me this when she was not in the room, as she was a bit shy about it, but then he proceeded touching her in a very inappropriate way. I was too awkward back then to walk away. Since then, I have learned to listen to my gut and not be so polite, but back then I just stayed and just listened because I felt like I couldn't leave. Long story short, he gave me many inappropriate details that I did not want to hear about his marriage imploding and his new relationship. After that, he offered me a room in the main house instead. I turned it down and went back to my tent. I was desperately thinking about how to get out of there. I had paid for 3 nights, but there was just something very wrong. I sat down on the air mattress and started going through my phone to see what my options were. As I was sitting there scrolling, I hear him come to the side of the tent. There's nothing else near it and nobody else. He just stands there, breathing. I could see his shadow through the tent. He's just standing there, not moving. I just froze up, couldn't think or say anything. I just went still. He stands there for what felt like an eternity, but it might have just been a few minutes. Then he left, and I threw everything I had into my car and just took off. I think I called and said that I cut my trip short when I was already far away. I have never been back, and I have never seen anyone else say anything strange about this place online. I can't find them on Airbnb, but the farm still seems operational as a B&B. I don't know if I was overreacting or not, but I still think about the panicked feeling I had in the tent and knew I couldn't have stayed. I traveled to Seoul for a week by myself back in 2018. Because I was still studying and at the time doing a semester abroad in Kyoto, and Seoul is expensive, I decided to book a room in a hostel. It was supposed to be a mixed dorm for 6 people. Upon arrival, I found out that I was actually going to share a room with 5 men who were already staying at the hostel. At that point, I was still quite naive and didn't think much of it. Besides, the hostel was already fully booked. There was one guy from Japan, one Korea, two Chinese, and a German in my room. The German guy gave me weird vibes from the beginning, especially by the way he just stared at me, but I brushed it off because I'll be out and about all day anyway. Every day he would ask me if I wanted to hang out and go see the sights together, which I really like to do on my own. So I always came up with an excuse. One time, I accepted his invitation to explore Gangnam, and it was just awkward. We had very little to speak about besides small talk. When I get ready in the morning, as in apply makeup and do my hair, he'd just stand there and watch, saying nothing. I got annoyed and asked him if he didn't have somewhere else to be several times. He'd just shrug. Anyway, for the entire week I was weirded out, but I did my best to avoid him. One time, we ran into each other at a cafe in the city center, which I found strange because what are the odds? The other guys in my dorm were actually super nice. We even went out to dinner one night. Then, on my very last day, I woke up too early and drifted back asleep. The next time I woke up, it was to him sitting by my bedside, caressing my arm and shoulder. I immediately sat straight up and asked him what he was doing. Even though it was only my arm he was touching, I felt disgusted. I always thought of myself as being someone who would scream and curse at someone in this situation, but I was simply dazed and shocked. He then went on to confess his love for me, how he wanted to meet up when we got back home. I'm from Germany too, and how I was just so special. When I pointed out that he couldn't possibly be in love with me because it had only been a week, he insisted that he just knew and that he wanted to show me affection. At that point, I was just nauseous. Of course, he was leaving that morning too and offered to go to the airport together. I insisted that I was taking the later bus, and he thankfully left it at that. I couldn't wait for him to just go and leave me alone. I'm glad I didn't run into him in the airport, but at some point I just burst into tears because it had been exhausting to ward off his advances all week, and then gently tell him I wasn't interested in him after he was fucking touching me while I was sleeping. I don't even know how I managed to remain so calm and polite to him, but who knows how he would have acted if I had been aggressive. With hindsight, I think I should have insisted on switching rooms, but up until that very last morning, nothing had actually happened, and I would tell myself that maybe the poor guy was just awkward and didn't mean it. After this, I never doubted my instincts again. I worked as a flight attendant for a few years when I decided to take an extended sabbatical from college. There were a handful of let's not meet situations I encountered, but one in particular still makes my skin crawl more than any other. I was born and raised in Texas, but had moved to New York when I turned 21, so when I found out at the beginning of the week-long trip that I would have a couple overnights in Austin, I was super excited to go to my home state for a few days. My brother lived just north of the city, and we planned to hang out and go to dinner the night I arrived when he got off work. And the following days, we were going to meet up with our dad, who lived about an hour away. So I get to the hotel downtown, the crew and I check in, and then we head off to our rooms. Short elevator ride, and I get to mine, where not even 5 minutes later there's a loud, hard knock on my door. It was only 1 or 2 p.m., and I hadn't called my brother or dad to let them know that I was in town yet, so they wouldn't know what room. I assumed it was maybe one of my crewmates, so I headed to the door. Before even making it to the door, however, a loud, male's voice on the other side boomed. The front desk sent me about the bathroom problem you called in. Before trying to open the door, "Unlock the door and open up, miss. I need in, now." I froze in my tracks. I hadn't even been in the bathroom yet alone called anyone at the front desk. I'm a petite chick, and while I take no shit from anyone despite my size, I still err on the side of caution. Slowly inching towards the door to look out the peephole, all I could tell was that this man on the other side was at least 6 feet tall and easily over double my weight. No way in hell I was gonna unlock the door. I responded to the guy, telling him that he must have the wrong room. He continued pounding on the door while constantly turning the handle, telling me no, he needed in and was getting into the room one way or another. I panicked, but thankfully had the sense to grab my phone and call the front desk. The concierge confirmed that they had neither sent anyone to my room, nor had they received a call about a bathroom. The entire time, this fucking guy was still determined to get into my room, pounding and yelling. Lucky for me, the front desk had sent security to my floor. When the security officers stepped off the elevator a few seconds later, I could hear them in the hall approaching the guy and ask who he was, what he was doing, and telling him that he needed to leave the hotel. He immediately got hostile and aggressive towards them, and the front desk clerk that I was still on the phone with tells me that the police have been called and are on their way. In the meantime, I'm trapped in my room, scared shitless. Long story short, the cops showed up pretty quickly and managed to arrest the guy for trespassing and criminal menacing or some shit. I later found out that the guy was also wanted in connection of a string of break-ins and violent sexual assaults in Austin. He had seen me and stalked me from the minute I entered the hotel lobby. Apparently, I was exactly his type of victim. Nothing else happened after that, but it still rattled the fuck out of me for the rest of my stay in that hotel. I've actually had a lot of very creepy encounters, but I wanted to submit this one first. It was my 21st birthday, so 3 of my best friends and I celebrated with a trip to NYC. 2 of my friends, Lana and Molly, didn't get along that well. The third, and this is my best friend to this day, Elle. My birthday is in December, so it was excruciating cold at this time of the trip. We were all staying in the same hotel room, can't remember the name. One night, I was pretty tired and ended up going back to the hotel a bit earlier. I didn't want to ruin my friend's time, and I was cool with them staying out later and going to a club. I also wanted to go back to the hotel because I was honestly emotionally drained. Throughout the day, Lana and Molly had been arguing on and off. Not really about anything huge, but just nitpicking because they presumably had very opposite personalities. I don't like drama, and being caught in the middle of it was getting annoying, so I really wanted to be by myself. So I'm back at the hotel, talking to my boyfriend at the time. 20 minutes in, I get a second call from Molly. I answer and she's crying. She was always pretty dramatic, but of course, I was concerned. Conversation went something like this. Lana is a fucking bitch. I'm coming back to the hotel to hang out with you. Are you okay? What happened? We got into a fight in the cab, and I just don't want to deal with her. I'm heading back now. Okay, be safe. When will you be here? In like 10 minutes. I'm getting a cab now. Okay, see you soon. We can talk when you get here. I hang up the phone with my boyfriend, telling him that I'm gonna hang out with her. She comes in a few minutes later and tells me about the fight. I can't even really remember what they fought about, but most likely it was petty or stupid. But we talked for a bit and I told her we should try to get some rest. It had been a long day and I was over the drama of that day, so we did. When Elle and Lana come back to the hotel about an hour later, Lana is pissed drunk. She comes in stumbling, yelling obscenities at Molly that I couldn't make out. Molly said something calmly, but to oppose her. Lana got really mad and kicked my suitcase really hard into the wall. This obviously pissed me off. It was one thing to be upset, but to damage other people's belongings is definitely not okay. I had enough and wanted to leave. One of my best friends, who wasn't able to come, had a sister who lived in Queens. Her family is like my family, So I texted her, telling her the situation, and asked if I could come stay with her for the night. She said of course, so I snatched my suitcase and headed towards the elevator. It was slow, so I was waiting there for a few minutes. Moments later, Molly came bursting out of the room. "I'm coming with you." "No, I want to be alone. I'm sorry I ruined your birthday. I want to come with you. I don't want to be around Lana all night. She's a fucking bitch." "Fine, whatever." The elevator opens up and we head to the lobby. It's around 2 a.m. at this time, and given that New York City is always bustling, I was surprised to see that there were virtually no hotel guests in the lobby. There was one man at the front desk and another hotel staff member standing around. It was really cold outside, so I wanted someone to hail a cab for me. I asked the front desk if he could have someone do it for me, and he called the other man over and asked. The other man was pretty tall, maybe 6 feet at least. Not overweight, but stockier for sure. He had a very short buzzed haircut and the most piercing blue eyes, but not the type that are kind. They seemed completely off, and I remember thinking all of this before he even opened his mouth to speak to me. "Where are you going?" he asked in a probably Russian accent. Even his voice seemed cold, like it lacked warmth or friendliness. I kinda choked on my words. We're going to Queens." He paused. He moved closer to me and got his face up in mine. I'm about 5'4", so he definitely was bending over a bit to get eerily close to me. To put in perspective how close he was, we could have easily kissed if he moved about an inch closer. Then he asked, "Is it just the two? Alone?" I said, yes," as I tried to move backwards a bit to create some distance. He literally stared into my eyes for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 seconds. Then he just smiled. I remember feeling so creeped out and was just kind of frozen. In my gut, I knew something was off. I looked at my friend, who was obviously uncomfortable as well. It was like she was trying to tell me with her eyes that this man gave her the creeps too. Finally, he backed away from me. "Stay right there." He then whipped his phone out and called someone. He was speaking Russian, so I didn't know what he said. The whole time, his eyes stayed on me and my friend, and I remember just feeling paralyzed. I was thinking, do we just run? I kept looking back at the glass doors of the hotel entrance, hoping that by a miracle, a cab would drive by so we could just leave. He got off his phone after about a minute and said, "Someone's coming, don't worry." A few minutes later, another man entered the hotel. He wasn't dressed like a hotel staff member at all, which was my biggest red flag. Then he started speaking with a creepy Russian man. They kept nodding while speaking to each other, while looking back at each other and then at my friend and me. The man with the creepy eyes looked at us and said, "He'll take you where you need to go." What? "Go with him. He will take you." Just then, I kid you not, I look back at the doors and see a cab slowly inching up our street in traffic. "Oh, it's okay. I see a cab right there. We're just gonna take that. Thanks," as I grabbed Molly's hand and began running out of the hotel to get in the cab. As soon as we get into the cab, we both look at each other and expressed our fears for what just happened. We both were really scared of the man and agreed that we thought something was incredibly off about the men and the encounter. The first thing that came to my mind was, maybe they were a part of a human trafficking ring. When I think back to the night, I always thank God for that cab. It came just at the right time. I'll never know for sure what the man's intentions were. Since then, I've lived in New York and visited again many times, and no other hotel staff member has ever offered to personally drive me somewhere. I don't know what would happen if we had gone with that man, but I have a feeling it would not be where we wanted to go. So this is my first post. What I'm about to say happened 2 years ago. I was only 10. Even my parents don't know about what happened, but hanging here and reading other people's stories made me feel the urge to share mine as well. For context, my father, mother, little sister, and me were in China, in a luxury hostel. The entrance from the building itself, which you had to take an elevator to access the big park, From this park, you would have to walk 3 or 4 minutes to arrive at the front of the 30th-floor building. It's designed to contain one really big suite per floor. So when taking the lift, you scan your card, and it will automatically bring you to the floor associated to it. So the third day on our trip, my parents decide to go on a date together, leaving me and my sister alone in the suite. They left us some cash so we could order some takeaway food. So I ordered some noodles and waited. When someone finally called to say that the food was there, I went to search for the food. That's when I did my first big mistake. I didn't close the front door, thinking no one could come here, and I wouldn't be able to open it since I would have a lot of things in my hand. I called the lift and waited, way too long. Then it was finally here. Somebody was in it. I politely said, "Hello," but he didn't answer. He was wearing a red sweater and Adidas jogging pants. I got in, pushed the 0 button, and the man exited the elevator. The door closed when I finally realized my second big mistake. Why the hell did he want out? He shouldn't, since there wasn't any other rooms except for my family's. That's when I started to panic. I tried to stop the lift, but it wouldn't stop. So as soon as I arrived to the ground floor, I immediately went back to my room's floor. The front door was wide open, and the absence of noise made me feel uncomfortable. Assuming that my sister had either been caught or she was hiding, I went for the second option because the man was taller than me, which meant his footsteps must have sounded heavier than mine on the ground, so I believed my sister's intelligence to figure it out. I found her hiding behind one of the sofas, crying. She told me that the man was searching in our luggage for valuable items. We played hide and seek with him for almost 30 minutes. The room was really big. I finally went into the room. I noticed that my Nintendo Switch had vanished and called the reception to send some security guys to arrest the man. Everything went pretty smoothly, and the man turned out to be the son of someone who lived here. One creepy thing, he had a knife on him coming from the kitchen of our suite, showing that he didn't just want some goods. So creepy man in our hostel, let's not meet. I was staying at a hotel with my Portuguese water dog. I had her outside on a leash for a potty break. Creepy guy follows us on the walk but keeps his distance. I take her to the grass area to potty and he stands there and glares at us. My dog backs into me, facing the creepy guy, growling. We go into her room, and instead of sleeping on the bed with me, she slept by the front door all night. Never saw him again, and I was there for a week. I've always said that dogs can sense danger, and I know that she sensed it from him. So my mom went to Canada on a spur-of-the-moment trip with her friend yesterday. We lived close enough to drive there. When she got there, she noticed that the Airbnb host had a lot of art on the wall. I started receiving some pictures from her of the walls, and they are covered in professionally framed pictures of hentai. They are pictures of girls crying while having things shoved inside of them. Girls gagged with duct tape, girls crying while having things shoved down their throats, and girls just screaming and being, you know. She also found real-life photos of girls tied up from different angles. They look more like BDSM sessions than actual evidence of a crime, so there's nothing to call the police over, but my mom was pretty horrified. She has PTSD from some childhood trauma that I'm not going to elaborate on, but suffice to say, this was pretty unsettling to her. Luckily, the room had a deadbolt on the door. Still, she didn't get much sleep. This happened in early 2017. I was a 23-year-old girl and I had just finished college. The field I studied was not huge in my area, so I decided to leave and move to the biggest city in my country to make a post-graduation course. As I was still unemployed, I decided I would wait to make a long-term rental contract, worrying about a bad commute to work. In the first couple months, I was switching from Airbnbs and hostels all the time. I was already tired of this. I decided that this would be my last move, and then, with or without a job, I would settle. I was already running out of money and decided to stay in a dorm in a hostel next to where I was taking classes. Sharing a bedroom isn't a problem during a trip, but when you are living somewhere, trying to create a routine and have some privacy, sharing a bedroom with complete strangers just sucks. I shared this dorm with 3 guys, but my bad encounter is not with any of them. They were nice, apart from the one snoring so bad at night, no biggie. In another dorm, however, was the creepiest person I've ever seen. He was in his mid-30s and not traveling. He was a native from the city we were in and was using the hostel as a new house since his parents kicked him out of theirs. He introduced himself and tried to be nice and flirty with me. I was polite initially, but declined his advancements. He started following me all day long inside the hostel. Anywhere I went, he would show up in less than 5 minutes. On my second day there, I left the hostel to go to a job interview, and by the time I arrived late at night, he sat alone on the front stairs waiting for me. He told me this like it was the most natural thing on earth. He would buy me snacks, ask me out, try to get information about my personal life, while I had already made it clear of my lack of interest in this friendship. All of this happened in 3 days. I was already exhausted of his presence, but what I didn't know is that it could get a lot worse. As soon as one of the guys that I was sharing a dorm with left, he asked the hostel staff to switch rooms and stay in the same one as me. Obviously, he didn't tell me this, so imagine how surprised and disgusted I was when I saw him coming in the dorm with all his belongings. I was so scared of his presence that I slept wearing jeans to avoid any advantage he could take from me while I was sleeping. The situation had exponentially went worse and I couldn't handle it anymore. While I was packing, this guy showed up, noticed what I was doing and started to cry, asking me not to leave him. Then, to make things even more creepy and disgusting, he told me that he missed seeing my face while I was sleeping, and thank God he had taken photos. I was trying my best to be chill about his behavior, but I just lost it when he told me he had taken pictures of me while I was sleeping. I snatched his phone from his hand, asked him to see the pictures, and deleted them all. There were a bunch of photos of me sleeping the night before. I left the hostel, and I regret not reporting him to the staff. I'm pretty sure they would have helped me, but I was too exhausted from the whole situation that I didn't even think about it at the time. Last summer I was working in Florida. I'm from Canada, but I got to work at Walt Disney World as a summer job. It was one of the most fun experiences that I've ever had, and I spent most of my summer on the Disney property. One day though, the Adventure Zone graphic novel was released, and I had to get my hands on it. The only place I could get a copy was at a Barnes & Noble, and the only way I could get there was taking the bus to Walmart, then walking like an hour. It was my day off, so I figured, might as well. Getting to Barnes & Noble was fine, but on the way back to the Walmart bus stop, I had walked past this parking lot. As I was passing the parking lot, someone beeped their horn at me. I stopped to look over because I thought it might be one of my Disney coworkers. A few of them had cars. A guy in a suit stepped out of his car and waved at me. He said hello, and I, being startled and trying to figure out if I knew him, responded. Bad idea. He immediately complimented me on my appearance and asked where I was working. He also said he could give me a ride back to wherever I was going. I was freaked out, but my impulse to not be rude was dangerously strong, and I told him I wasn't interested, and I liked taking the bus. He laughed and said that if I was interested, he could drive me home and get me a job at his hotel, where he worked. For some reason, despite being pretty upset at this point, I kept talking to him and told him the truth, that I couldn't work anywhere other than the company that sponsored my visa. He laughed a second time and told me the visa wouldn't be a problem. It was at that point that my survival instincts finally overrode my friendliness instincts, and I hurriedly told him, "No thank you, I'm moving back to Canada, goodbye," before booking it into Walmart. In Walmart, I grabbed a couple of things and went to cash out, still freaked out. I tried to talk to the employee who was cashing me out so that maybe she could contact someone about the man. For all I knew, this could be some sort of sex trafficking scheme. I don't know. Unfortunately, that wasn't much better. She was extremely dismissive. She made a couple of jokes saying things like, "Well, was he cute at least? Did you want to ride home?" and laughing. I didn't cry or anything, but I could feel my face turning red as I felt so patronized over something that had me really upset. Thankfully, the woman behind me in line asked if I was okay and tried to tell the clerk that I obviously wasn't trying to joke around, but she still didn't seem to care much. Once I got outside, I was thankful that there was other Disney cast members at the bus stop. I didn't talk to any of them, but at least I didn't feel as vulnerable. So, Walmart parking lot guy, I hope next time I go to Florida we don't meet. I don't want to work in a hotel with you. And Walmart clerk, I don't particularly feel like ever meeting you again either. Not the craziest story, but true. So about 1.5 years ago, I went on a school trip to New York. We tried to minimize every cost, so we stayed in hostels. They were pretty nice, to be fair. One day we come back and we're huddled around the courtyard kind of section in front to get a debrief on the following day. There were 30 of us kids and 3 teachers. The lead teacher stood on a bench as she addressed us. This tall man was walking past and joined the back of our group. A few of the boys noticed and pointed it out. We had gotten a few questions from people on the trip about who we were, so we didn't find it weird at all at first. The man then saw my teacher staring and blurted out, "You're so beautiful." She was flattered, but a little confused. He remained there as if he joined us. It was super weird. He kept complimenting her. As we filed into the lobby, he followed us. One teacher flagged one of the staff, and he kindly stepped in. "Hi, what room are you in?" Yeah, 3. As he tried to pass him. 3? What floor? What section? I lost my key. He runs past him and continues to follow our group. We were going to the basement to use the kitchen, so it was definitely not a coincidence. He just kept politely getting escorted away by the staff, but kept coming back. Our teacher told us to go to our rooms, so I don't know what happened after. It doesn't sound that crazy, but it was just super creepy. So it was early 2020, and I was on a trip with my friend in London. We're 2 22-year-old girls and just wanted to spend the weekend looking around the galleries and getting to feel the city as we were thinking of moving there. We were staying in kind of a dingy hostel in East London, but we were barely ever there. We stumbled in late at night after being out most nights. We were in a shared room with 2 other sets of bunk beds. Most nights we weren't really aware of any others being in the room, other than the odd snorer who was gone by morning. But our last night, a new person had arrived. We noticed he laid out his clothes neatly on the bed, and all his shoes were lined up perfectly against the wall. He was sleeping under the duvet, despite his clothes being left on the top of the bed. Almost like he heard us coming up and jumped into bed before we came into the room. The lights were on too. We were both pretty drunk, so didn't take much notice and went to sleep ourselves. The next morning we were flying home on a really early flight, like 6 a.m. When we woke up around 3:30 a.m., he was already awake, and while we were both getting our things together, we noticed that he was taking his stuff out of this bag methodically, in a really particular order. He was muttering under his breath, but wasn't saying anything that we could make out, but kept laughing to himself and got progressively louder. We both text back and forth about how odd he seemed to be, but we were leaving soon, so we weren't too worried about it. I walked into the bathroom to brush my teeth, the door slightly ajar. My friend was directly outside finishing up her makeup, so I didn't see the point of shutting the door and locking it just to brush my teeth. Seconds after I walked in, he walks in. I froze, but then I thought I should act as normal as possible, instead of reacting or freaking out, as that might cause him to lash out. and I could already tell that he wasn't totally normal. While I'm standing there brushing my teeth, he stares into the mirror at himself for about 20 seconds, almost glaring at himself. He seemed angry. He started grinding his teeth and grunting too. Then he switched and tapped on and started flinging water at his face, most of it flying behind him or down his clothes. He kept making grunting sounds, and they were getting louder. Bear in mind, I was about 2 feet away from him brushing my teeth. I completely freak out and swallow my toothpaste without rinsing and walk out the bathroom. My friend was sat outside, her eyes wide, and she was shaking. She said when I walked into the bathroom, he stopped what he was doing, stared at my friend, smiled really creepily, and then walked in after me, keeping eye contact with her, which was odd because he never tried to make eye contact with me. We grabbed our stuff and ran downstairs. At first, I was tired and I didn't fully process how weird it was, but looking back, it could have been really dangerous and was definitely very weird. Creepy man who decided to join me in the bathroom, I hope I never see you again. This happened back in the spring of 2007 when my buddy and I were doing a month-long backpacking trip across Europe. We had started in London and took every imaginable mode of transportation through France, the Netherlands, Germany, and finally ended our trip in Italy. Due to a bus delay, we arrived in Rome several hours later than scheduled. The folks at the hostel said they assumed that we weren't going to show up and rented our beds to other travelers. Not to worry, they told us. There was a spillover property across the city they rented out for such occasions. This was a 2-bedroom apartment with several bunk beds packed into the rooms. Here, we spent our last 3 nights in Europe, along with a group of young Spaniards we ended up going clubbing with and having a blast. On our last day, our Spaniard friends left and were replaced with a large group of 10 Latin American men and 1 woman that we met briefly before heading out on our final night in Rome. There was a bit of a language barrier, but everyone seemed nice, and we headed out separately. My friend and I got back to our bunks around 2 a.m., and about an hour later, the other group stumbled in, clearly pretty drunk. They all got into their bunks, and within 15 minutes the lights were out, and they were snoring away. All but one. One of the young men on the upper bunk directly across from me was still awake, seemingly playing with his phone. My eyes were shut, and I started to drift off to sleep, just as a bright light hit me directly in the face, and I heard the shutter click sound on his camera phone. Annoyed, but not wanting to be confrontational, I turned my back, facing away, hoping he would just go to bed. Instead, he continued taking photos of me, whispering obscenities in English that I won't repeat here. I realized that being passive was the wrong strategy when he got down off his bunk and crept over to mine. For a few moments he just stood over me, apparently with his hands on the upper bunk where my traveling companion slept. At one point, my heart rate was going through the roof and I quickly started considering my options. A cold realization suddenly hit me. We were in a private apartment with no other travelers or staff in the building. If I confronted this person, he might awake his companions. I have no idea whether these men are dangerous, and if they were, we might be in the fight for our lives. If they were so inclined, they could probably kill us and just say that we left on schedule, and we would never be heard from again. I was thinking of kicking the dude in the stomach and bolting to the kitchen to grab a knife, when he suddenly knelt down and reached into my bed. That was it. I sat up sharply and got right in his face, asking, "You fucking need something, dude?" As menacing as I could. He froze. Without saying a word, he got up and walked into the common area. I heard the bathroom door shut. After a minute later, he got back in his bunk, and 10 minutes after that, he too was snoring peacefully. I was wide awake, fully dressed and ready to battle for the rest of the night. Shortly before dawn, I woke up my friend and we got out of there. He did ask, "What was that guy doing last night?" But I have no idea how he was aware of the whole thing. We were on our flight to Heathrow a couple hours later, and we never discussed it since. So yeah, creepy photographer dude, if I see you in public, you might meet these hands. This happened in the summer of 2018. I was 22, and that summer I was lucky enough to get a summer internship in London and found a dorm-type housing situation. The company generously provided a housing stipend to all the interns who were traveling a certain distance from home. So keep in mind, my job is paying for this. The building I lived in was Green Lines and was meant for people that were in London short term, typically students. You can pay rent week by week. They provide both suites, private restrooms, and a shared kitchen, which is what I had, as well as just rooms without bathrooms. The following details are how the building was set up and are kind of important, so please bear with me. To get into the building, you had just one key card, which unlocked the entrance of the building, your hallway, as well as a suite or bedroom, but not any other hallway. To get into the building, you had to enter a metal gate from the street with a key card onto the property, which also included a little backyard and bike racks. Then use the key card again to enter the actual building. You would use it again for the elevator, go to your floor, swipe into your hallway, then swipe into your room. With all that out of the way, I could proceed to the actual creepy encounter. So I had been living there for about 3 weeks and even made a great friend from India who was in London doing a 6-month pastry course at some hotshot baking school. Me and her hit it off the second we met. We'll call her Priya. She and I, as well as a 30-year-old man from Spain in London on some marketing training course his company was paying for, made a ritual of gathering each night to smoke, drink wine, watch the World Cup, and generally chill because we had a really great trio formed. They're both great people. So the night this all went down was just like any other. I came home from work, got off the bus on my block, and was approaching the first metal gate to my hostel. Standing there was this man, about 30 to 35 years old, with very unique hair. I'd never seen him before, but people came and went all the time in this place. He was fiddling with a magnetic key card, just like mine. I knew he belonged there because the keys had the building's logo printed on them. So I could tell that it was, in fact, just his keycard's magnetic strip malfunctioning. I said hello and introduced myself and helped him inside. I, as a woman, am cursed with a very friendly and sunny disposition. I'm very easy to talk to. I find something in common with almost anyone, which often led me to men I've rejected cursing me out for leading them on by having been nice to them. This guy starts to flirt with me right away, and I drop casually that I have a boyfriend. He asked for my number, and my stupid ass actually gave it to him, because I figured he just moved there. He seems nice. We have a pretty great evening squad I chill with, and figured maybe it would be nice to invite him down for a smoke with Priya, our Spanish friend, and I, in the evenings. Because I'm the type of person to think, oh, if he's living here, he's probably new to London, and knows no one. Like all of us when we got here. Only thing is, and this is embarrassing and hilarious, except for my own phone number, I only know one other by heart, my mother's. So literally, without thinking, when I was asked for my number, I recited my mom's phone number on reflexes and didn't realize it until about 10 minutes later when I got back to my room and my mom calls me frantic, screaming, "Who are you giving my number to over there?" And instantly, I understood what just happened and was like, "Oh, my bad, Mom. I did the phone number thing again." To which she responds, "That's good and fine, but whoever the fuck he is, you need to stay the fuck away from him." So essentially, he started texting my mom as though it was me, naturally, and she understood what was up right away and nicely replied, "Oh, I'm sorry. This has happened before. This is not Elle's number, but her mother's. But here's hers." And he started sending her voice memos on WhatsApp screaming, like, "What kind of fucking games are you playing with me?" Aggressive as shit. So I texted him explaining my mistake and how no one was playing games with his ass and to watch his fucking mouth. Basically, once he realizes I'm not trying to play games with him or whatever, he goes back to being a gentleman, by which I mean immediately asking me to come check me, which I assume is British slang for see me in my room. So at this point, I don't mess with this dude because of how aggressive his reaction was. I'm not going to hang out with him or invite him to meet my friends. So I politely declined, saying I'm not trying to have anyone in my room, and that's when he starts demanding to know my hallway and room number. At this point, I'm pretty freaked out, because all women know men are fucking scary. Thank God, his keycard doesn't have access to my hallway, even if he knew which one I was in. After realizing I'm not going to tell him, and also realizing that he creeped me the fuck out, meaning we will not get to hang out, he started to literally threaten me, sending voice memos on WhatsApp, screaming on the top of his lungs that I'ma see you next Tuesday, and a stupid bitch, and that he'll literally fucking kill me. Mind you, it has been about 30 minutes at this point since I met this man. He also sent me death threats the following day around 10 a.m. I did the only thing I could, which was to immediately contact hostel management and report this. I provided them with all the screenshots and voice memos, and there was no arguing. They kicked him out by the very next morning, and also told me that the police were involved, though no one ever spoke to me about it. I assumed they didn't have to, as management had screenshots and voice memos to show them. I was told that police came around 9 in the morning. That timestamp made me realize he sent me the threats this morning after the police spoke to him. He's mad that I called the cops, and he seemed pretty crazy, so I was afraid. I went to work the next morning and told my boss what happened. She was a wonderful boss and mentor, so I was telling her because I was shaken up more than anything. I'm extremely happy that I did talk to her though, because she waited for me to finish talking and wide-eyed said, "You're not staying another minute at that place." Because she was thinking what I was thinking. Was to stop the creep from waiting for me outside the front gates one of those days and attacking me. I can't thank her enough because she came home with me and packed all my things straight from work and rented a comfortable hotel for 3 nights, for which she generously paid out of pocket because she wasn't really allowed to put it on the company card. Within that 3 days, she helped me find a nice Airbnb apartment that I shared with a very nice roommate for the remainder of my time in London. And it actually ended up being cheaper than the hostel, unbelievably, because the hostel was in Green Lanes, and this flat was about a 3-minute walk from the Old Saint station. I was so thankful for her amazing initiative, but was sad to leave my hostel friends and nightly routine behind so suddenly. All this shit went down within 12 hours. In the following weeks, Pariah did in fact see this guy lurking around the building several times, as he was easy to spot with his aforementioned very unique hair. I thank my lucky stars that I never had the chance to introduce them, because who knows if he would have targeted her in lieu of me once I moved, because he knew we were friends. I'm very lucky to have the incredible boss I had, who went above and beyond to keep me safe. Let me just preface this story as to why I was traveling alone. So, one of my best friends, Kayla, and I worked seasonally at a hiking lodge in the BC for the summer. We were both girls in our early 20s. She lives and goes to school in New Brunswick, and I live and work as a chef in Toronto for the winter. We decided this year, as I bought a new car, instead of flying back home, we would do an epic Canadian coast-to-coast road trip. Everything was going wonderfully. So wonderfully, in fact, we ended up staying longer in a few unexpected places and had to cut our East Coast portion of the trip a little short. Now, my friend Kayla started her schooling on November 1st, so I dropped her at home in New Brunswick on Halloween and stayed there at her place. I was planning to head to Toronto the next day. After a few glasses of Chardonnay and some laughs, I decided I couldn't come this close to the East Coast and not see the Cabot Trail in Nova Scotia. Something that had been on my bucket list for years. So knowing that I still had a week more of vacation before my winter contract, I hastily booked a hostel for the next day, November 1st, at the Aculet Hostel on the Cabot Trails. When I booked, only one option came up. I assumed, because I waited till the last minute to book, it was a private dorm with a queen-size bed for $35. I thought, what a bargain, and booked immediately. I left Kayla's house at 7 a.m. knowing it was a long drive. Now the Cabot Trail is roughly 150 kilometers long, so I thought to be safe, I plugged the hostel address into my Google Maps and headed straight there to get my bearings. I would arrive at the hostel roughly around noon, and knowing that was too early to check in, I figured I would consult with the front desk to figure out nearby hiking trails and bring my bags in later. I was about to arrive to my hostel, according to Google, but all around me was nothing but farmland. Google instructed me, "The destination is on your left." I saw nothing. About 50 yards up the road, I saw a wire bar bent to look like an A that was sprayed paint bright red. I was staying at the Acculate Hostel, so I guessed that might be the place, and I followed the dirt road. It led me to what I can only describe as a dilapidated barn, no signage. There were 2 cars parked up front, so I parked alongside them and got out of my car and tried to figure out where I was. Once I got out, a smallish man, around mid-40s with dark hair and intense eyes, popped out of the barn. He asked me if I was staying with them tonight. I said yes. He asked why I booked so last minute, and I explained to him my situation. Seeming satisfied with my answer, he insisted on taking me on the grand tour of the barn. The first thing I noticed that the entirety of the barn had been dug out around the foundation, about 5 feet deep and 3 feet around. He led me across some particle board laid down as some sort of ramp leading inside. The second thing I noticed about the property is that there's no windows. This was clearly a barn meant for livestock. The gentleman leading me on this tour was named Kevin, the owner. He proceeds to tell me about his grand plans for the space. It all seemed pretty far-fetched, as it was just a big barn with particle board separating most of the rooms. He led me up the skeleton stairs made of plywood and 2x4s to a cabin loft, where I'd be sleeping that night, along with his family, the mother, his son, and Kevin's own mother, who insisted I call her mom. The upstairs was certainly an open concept. A frail curtain separated the beds to the sides, with a large open area in the middle. I asked him if I was the only occupant that night. He said yes. I had a feeling he didn't often get occupants. I told him I was very interested in hikes in the area and wanted to get to them before it got dark. He gave me very detailed instructions of his favorite hikes and how to get to them, and off I went. I figured the place wasn't ideal. I wish the website would have let me know that it was still being built. But hey, I booked it last minute and beggars can't be choosers. Plus, he was very friendly and helpful on his hiking advice. I hiked the area until it started getting dark. I didn't pack enough food for the day, and I figured I would head into town for dinner. The nearest town was clearly a booming tourist destination during the summer, but now in the off-season, it was a ghost town. All the hotels and B&Bs in the area were boarded up. Such a ghost town that even the liquor stores were closed for the off-season. Finally, I found a dark and dingy, empty bar to eat dinner. It was, to phrase lightly, a disappointing supper. I had this romantic image in my head of sitting in front of a harbor front, sipping on bubbly, slurping back ocean-fresh oysters. I was assured by the server, bartender, cook, that the fried oysters that I ordered were definitely not fresh. I didn't ask. I figured, with all my options for things to do and see exhausted, I should head back to the hostel and read my book. I got back roughly at 8 p.m. I could smell the family who lived there was in the midst of dinner. A little boy ran down the wood steps to greet me. He yelled, as little boys always do, "My name is JP, what's yours?" I say, "Nice to meet you, JP. My name is Alex." He immediately asked if I wanted to come play. I said definitely, just let me put my bags down in my room first. He followed me through the translucent curtains to my room. So instead of getting settled in, I headed straight out into the main area. I started throwing a foam ball with JP. His mother, father, grandmother were all sitting down to eat without even acknowledging we were there, playing just right in front of them. The mother and father just start what seems to be a basic argument, which turns into them yelling at each other. Completely weirded out, I told JP that I needed to go into my room and call my mommy, as she was wondering where I am. Of course, the boy doesn't understand proper boundaries, and follows me through the curtains and sits on my bed. I'm trying to take his attention away from his family fighting, so I start asking him where he goes to school, his favorite color, etc. His mom starts calling for him, but he doesn't answer. Instead chooses to sit on my lap and hug me. Not wanting to cause any problems, I yell to the mom that he's in my room. She runs in and snatches him off my lap and yells to his father, "I know what you're like when you get angry. I'm taking JP, don't follow us." I hear her book it down the stairs and him run after her. I hear her car start up in the lot and not just drive, but fucking peel out of the driveway. I hear him cursing, a door slams, and the sound of the excavator I had seen outside earlier in the day come on. I guess he wanted to get some handiwork done to let off some steam. Now, just left upstairs is me and Grandma, who still insists I call her Mom. I walk out of my not-so-private curtained room with my bag and say, "Listen, you guys have been great hosts, but I should go." She starts rubbing my arm and telling me to stay, explaining her daughter-in-law doesn't understand Kevin like she does, and she's the real problem. Now, I'm ready to tell the mom to just fuck off and just leave, until I realize she still has a knife in her hand from cooking dinner. It's about a 4-inch knife, but with intent. I'm sure it would do some damage. I don't think she meant it as a threat. I think she was just a kooky old bird who didn't understand. Maybe don't hold a knife when you're trying to console a stranger. So I go along with what she's saying, while she rubs my arm with one hand and flails the knife around in the other. I inch closer and closer downstairs to the door. She keeps rubbing my arm and shoulders with her free hand, telling me to stay, and that her grandson is special. And before I even booked the night with them, that he had a premonition that I would be staying with them. As soon as I get to the door, I run towards my car. I start my engine and back up into the lot to get out of there. Kevin in the excavator blocks my path with about a 5-foot ditch on one side of the drive and the forest behind me. He gets out saying sorry and tells me I should stay. He'll make it up to me. Grandma comes out with a knife still in hand, saying it's Kevin's fault I'm leaving. They bicker for about 5 minutes until I yell that if they don't let me leave, I'm calling the police. All of a sudden, they got super defensive, like I'm being the one unreasonable. So I turn off my engine and start to dial. Kevin gets back into his excavator and starts backing up. As soon as he's far enough, I can see an opening to drive across the grass. I turn my engine back on and rip out the drive. I'm sure doing a number on the suspension of my little sedan. As soon as the property is out of sight, I go to call my friend Kayla. No service. I remembered back to earlier that afternoon when I first got to the hostel. I was gonna check my messages and saw that there was no service. Even if I wanted to, I wouldn't have been able to call the cops. I drove the 6 hours straight to New Brunswick and stayed with Kayla. This happened in early 2017. I was a 23-year-old girl and I just finished college. The field I studied was not huge in my area, so I decided to leave. I moved to the biggest city in my country to make a post-graduation course and look for a job. As I was still unemployed, I decided I would wait to make a long-term rental contract, worrying about a future bad commute to work. In the first couple of months, I was switching between Airbnbs and hostels all the time. I was already tired of this. I decided this would be my last move, and then, with or without a job, I would settle. I was already running out of money and decided to stay in a dorm in a hostel next to where I was taking classes. Sharing a bedroom is no problem to me during a trip, but when you're living somewhere, trying to create a routine and have some privacy, sharing a bed with complete strangers just sucks. I would share the dorm with 3 guys, but it's not with them that I had my bad encounter. They were nice, apart from one of them snoring so bad at night. No biggie. In another dorm, although, was the creepiest person I've ever seen. He was in his mid-30s and was not traveling. He was a native from the city we were in and was using the hostel as a new house since his parents kicked him out of theirs. He introduced himself and tried to be nice and flirty with me. I was polite but declined his invest. He wouldn't stop. He started following me all day long inside the hostel. Anywhere I went, he would show up in less than 5 minutes. On my second day there, I left the hostel to a job interview, and by the time I arrived back, late at night, he was sitting alone at the front stairs waiting for me. He told me this like it was the most natural thing on earth. He would buy me snacks, ask me out, try to get information about my personal life, all of this when I already made it clear of my lack of interest. All this happened in 3 days. I was already exhausted by his presence, but what I didn't know is that it could have went worse. As soon as one of the guys left that we were sharing the dorm with, he asked the hostel staff to switch dorms and stay in my room. Obviously, he didn't tell me this, so imagine how surprised and disgusted I was when I saw him coming to the dorm with all his belongings. I was so scared of his presence that I slept wearing jeans to avoid any sort of advantage he could take on me while I was sleeping. The next morning, I decided to leave. The situation had exponentially went worse, and I couldn't handle it anymore. While I was packing, this guy showed up, noticed what I was doing, and started to cry, asking me not to leave him. Then, to make things more creepy and disgusting, he told me that he missed seeing my face while I was sleeping, and thanked God that he had taken photos. I was trying my best to be chill about his behavior, but I just lost it when he told me he had taken pictures of me while I was sleeping. I took his phone from his hand, asked to see the pictures, and deleted all of them. There is a bunch of photos of me sleeping in the night before. I left the hostel and really regret not reporting him to the staff. Crazy lonely dude from the hostel, please, let's never meet again. A few years ago, I worked at a well-known hostel in Seattle. I worked the graveyard shift, so most of my shift was spent processing reservations and surfing the web. This was when I actually discovered Reddit. Anyway, one night I noticed this ad on Craigslist about a new hostel that had opened up in South Seattle. Being bored and curious, I gave the guy a call to find out the rates, accommodations, etc. He answered with a dry, "Hello." I asked if I called the right number for the hostel, and he responds with a quick, "Oh yeah, how can I help you?" I don't mention that I'm an employee at another hostel, and instead inquire about the location, price, typical stuff. He tells me that the location is hard to describe, and it would be best if I just met him at the closest convenience store, and he would take me to the hostel from there. No thank you. Click. I had heard all I needed to hear. Throughout the rest of my time at my hostel, there would be times that we would be full and would give suggestions to the visitors on places to stay. I made it a point to mention this place as an anti-suggestion. One of my guests actually informed me that he had stayed there a few months before, and it was in fact something to stay away from. The hostel, I'm told, was basically an old house that had been completely gutted. So it was just 2 big rooms, a kitchen, and a large room with bunk beds, dirt floor, and a television in the room with the bunk beds. No travelers, just crackheads and tweakers, who had clearly been living there for some time. No staff. Dude picked him up at the convenience store, as offered, brought him to the hostel, took his money and left. A couple days ago, I woke up and went to the ground floor to go outside for a cigarette. I took the stairs down and opened the door to the lobby, only to be greeted by a girl with a towel around her who looked traumatized, accompanied by ambulance staff. I had actually seen this girl and her friend the night prior, coming in with boxes of beer, happy and laughing. Looked like they had a good night ahead of them. I proceeded to go outside and have my cigarette. There were a couple of police officers who came up to me and asked for my details because they suspected I had a warrant for my arrest. I just had a similar appearance to who they were looking for, I guess. Then I saw a detective. That's when I knew something serious had gone down in there, but not sure what exactly. They loaded the girl into the ambulance and the detective jumped in after to interview the girl. I went back inside and eventually came out for another smoke about an hour later. The ambulance and the police were still there. The detective jumped out, and the ambulance drove off. There was also a red van parked across the street, just observing what was going on. This is where it gets interesting. One of the officers came out and retrieved a whole bunch of brown bags from the detective's SUV. They went back inside and returned empty-handed. Him and his partner then drove off. About 20 minutes later, the detective comes out with the bags. They were all filled, and puts them into her vehicle. She proceeds to keep going in and out for the next hour or so. each time coming out with bags filled with stuff, evidence I'm guessing. There were some clear bags that had some linens and blankets in them. She then comes out with more bags, and there's a man accompanying her who I hadn't seen yet. He wasn't wearing police attire, but had a logo on his shirt that I didn't get a close enough look at to make out. He was carrying out one of those cameras and tripods you see in TV and movies that they use to photograph the crime scene. He loads it into the red van, then drives off. The detective goes back inside. She later comes back out with her partner, who I hadn't seen the whole time. They hop into the SUV and drive off. Nobody came out in cuffs, and no body was rolled out. I assumed they would have done that through the rear entrance. This was the middle of the city and highly populated, so I guess they wanted to keep it out of the public eye. I knew whatever happened was on level 3 because I entered the building earlier right after the police officers, and the indicator said that the elevator was on level 3. Later that night, I decided to go up to level 3 just to have a snoop around, see if there's any crime tape or anything like that. I don't know. I took the stairs because the swipe card doesn't allow me to go to level 3. I'm on level 1. And whoa, as soon as I opened the door to enter the level, I got a huge sense of doom, shivers down my spine, and could just feel a really dark force. I immediately shut the door and went back downstairs. I haven't seen anything on the news. No articles on the internet, nothing. I assume it was a degenerate or some kind because this place was filled with them. Not worth the news or ruining the backpacker's reputation. So many theories running through my head. I didn't see the other girl who I saw entering the night prior. Maybe she fled. Maybe she's the one who was killed. Maybe she was the killer. Maybe the other girl's the killer. Maybe it was self-defense, outright murder, who knows. I can't be certain, but I'm pretty sure it was a homicide from what I saw. I'm a 23-year-old female staying in Paris at a hostel with 4 beds to a room. This man introduces himself. He tells me to take these vitamins he had. I kept saying no, and he kept being pushy and asking why I'm afraid to take them. I told him I don't need vitamins from him. Later that night, he invites me to go out with him and tells me he'll show me a good time. He offers me a bottle of wine, which I decline. About 10, he heads down to the bar and tells me he'll wait 1 hour for me to come. I planned on going out that night, but not with him, obviously. He comes up at 11 and asks me why I didn't come. I told him I wasn't going out that night. After he left, I got ready for the club and headed there. I had a great night and got home around 9 a.m. He was back in the room and was angry for me going out without him, literally yelling at me. Immediately, I go downstairs and request a room change. In the late 90s, I accompanied my mom to England so she could see where her grandparents had lived. I was basically just there to look after her because my dad didn't want to come and my mom has a hard time doing things for herself. Our agreement was after spending a week in England, the second week we could spend in Ireland, but my mom was terrible at planning, so we ended up spending a week in sort of limbo in Liverpool, waiting for the Irish Sea to calm down so we could cross on a ferry. It was September, probably the worst month to try to cross, and we never made it to Ireland. So anyway, for 5 days, I had to try to find places for us to sleep at night because she had made no hotel reservations for the entire 2-week stay, and I was completely unaware of this until we were already in England. I picked a hotel that seemed okay, and my mom paid to sleep in a different room because she had really bad restless leg syndrome and shakes violently at night. It literally keeps everyone up. In the middle of the night, I heard a man yelling in the hallway. He had to have been very intoxicated. He was pounding on doors all the way down the hall and hitting the walls. Being a punk-ass kid I made the mistake of acknowledging his rage by telling him to shut up. This enraged him. He started beating on my door, screaming that he was going to kill me. He tried the doorknob, and thank God those doors have automatic locks. I started looking around the room and realized this hotel has no phones in the room. Like I said, this was in the 90s, no cell phones. I went to the window, but I was 3 floors up and the windows didn't open either. So I just stayed there, listening as he did his best to break down the door while threatening what he was going to do to me once he opened the door. This went on for at least 20 minutes. Somehow, I fell asleep. When I woke up the next day, I saw how much damage he had done. He had smashed in my door with a fire extinguisher he had pulled off the wall. There were dents and marks all the way down the hall where he had dragged it violently from end to end. The worst part was my mom down the hall never said anything. When I told the clerk as we were checking out, he looked at me like I was crazy and making it up. I told him, just go look. Later I asked my mom about it and she said, "Oh yes, I thought I heard you screaming. Was that you crying for help?" It was April 2008. I was 20 and living in Denver for a year-long work contract with a nonprofit in Boulder. My girlfriend, now wife, and my best friend Tim drove to Colorado from our home state to visit me for my 21st birthday. The nonprofit I was working for housed their workers in dorm rooms, and drinking was not allowed on site, nor were visitors allowed to stay overnight. So I booked a hotel room in downtown Denver for the weekend, where we could drink in honor of my 21st. The hotel was big, very nice, and in a safe central area of the city. So nice, in fact, that it was the same hotel that most of the politicians would stay later during the DNC convention of '08 that took place in Denver later that summer. My wife and Tim arrived Saturday morning, and we all met at the hotel. The day was fantastic. We drank across the city most of the day. By about 1 a.m., we got back to the hotel. The room was typical, with 2 queen beds. Bed 1 was close to the big window looking out across the city. Bed 2 was pushed up against the wall with a door that opened to the bathroom. You couldn't see the door or entryway to our room unless you were at the foot of bed 1. We drank more and chatted in the room until about 4 a.m. My wife was laying on the head of bed 2, flipping through the TV. Tim and I were seated at the foot of bed 1, staring at the window as we talked. As we talked, we heard some movement and the sound of the door opening. Without looking away from the window, I assumed that my wife was getting up to use the bathroom. A few minutes passed by, and I thought I heard some movement again, so I finally turned back to look around. I saw my wife still lounging in the bed too, as she had been. "Did you get up a few minutes ago to use the bathroom?" I asked her. "No," she replied. "I thought I heard a door," I said back to her, with her just looking confused back at me. "Yeah, I heard it too," Tim said, breaking his own gaze from the window. It was then I started to run cold and sobered up pretty quickly. Very softly, I heard Tim say, I think there's someone in our room." I lurched forward from the foot of the bed to look at the pitch black entryway. I could barely make it out, and I wanted to believe I wasn't seeing it. But there's a man dressed in all black with a black baseball cap pressed into a 90-degree corner of the entryway where the room and wall met. Absolute silence fell in the room, and it felt like hours passed as I started to panic in my mind like no way I ever have in my entire life. We knew that we weren't alone and hadn't been for a while, and he knew we had spotted him. Eventually, Tim got the courage to meekly speak in the direction of the entryway and said, "Hey man, is there something we can help you with?" Another period of silence that felt like an eternity went by. He slumped off the edge of the wall a little bit into the light and made eye contact with Tim and I. We all just stared at each other. Then eventually he spoke up and said, "Is this room 1709? "No man, it's not," Tim said, stroking his beard nervously. He stared at us a while longer, raising his eyebrows and shaking his head. He turned around and left. We then erupted into a million curse words and paced around the room. I called the front desk. They told me that he was drunk and they found him in the stairwell, directing him back to the right room. Minutes later, Tim called the front desk and they told him that he wasn't a guest. He was apprehended in the stairwell and taken into police custody. Then a while later, they told my wife that he had disappeared and they had no idea who he was or what he was doing. They told her that there wasn't even a room 1709 in the hotel. We got 3 different stories from them. We still have no idea what that was about or how he managed to get a key card to our room. We were sure that the door was closed. It was easily the most terrifying moment of my life. Always use a latch in your hotel rooms. We got the stay refunded and about $200 in credit for the food from the hotel. We should have sued, but we were young and dumb. This happened a few years ago, but upon discovering the sub, it reminded me of the incident that I wanted to share. The year 2018, me and 3 other friends, we were all males in our early 20s, decided to travel to Bali for about a week since it was cheap, and we had the time, so why not? Our itinerary included sightseeing, trying local foods, mountain climbing, visiting bars at the beach. Basically a typical vacation in Indonesia. It was honestly quite a surreal experience. The country is absolutely beautiful and the food was amazing. The only issue I had about the trip were the locals. Drugs are very prominent there, especially mushrooms. The streets were filled with druggies dying to sell you drugs. I'm not exaggerating when I say this. One dude even grabbed my arm because I ignored his 2-for-1 deal for a one-way trip to meet Jesus. I shrugged him off while my friends laughed it off, suggesting that I may be passing up a chance to meet our Lord and Savior. He looked rabid and frantic, like he was about to pounce onto me like a dog diagnosed with rabies. I didn't feel too afraid as we were confident that we would handle them since half of them were not even sober. However, that is only the tip of the iceberg. The horror starts when we went back to our Airbnb for the night. We had an early day the next morning and we were exhausted. The place was extremely cheap and it didn't even have the proper looking mechanisms for the door. It had 2 wooden doors which swung inwards, and the only way to lock them was to wedge a wooden block through the holes mounted on the door. It was quite a primitive lock, but it gets the job done, I guess. Everything was going well until the last night of our trip when we realized that the wooden block was missing. We looked everywhere for it, but to no avail. I just figured that one of us must have misplaced it somewhere. We settled for using a selfie stick instead, since we did not have anything that would fit the holes to wedge the door closed. We turned in for the night, since we had already stayed there for 6 days with no issue. I woke up to a strange clicking sound in the dead of night. I got out of my bed and thought maybe it was one of the guys, so I nonchalantly approached the noise. My friends were all asleep, so I decided to investigate the cause of the noise. The ruckus seemed to be coming from the door, so I headed towards them, feeling extremely confused. Who could be at our doorstep at this time of night? I noticed the doors were slightly opened and the selfie stick was horribly deformed. I peeked outside and saw 3 people staring through the gap between the doors. They were really close to the entrance and were attempting to push open the door. I yelled at them, questioning their intentions as I noticed one of them was holding the wooden block. I was shocked and puzzled at the situation as I recognized one of them. He did the overall cleaning for the Airbnbs and pathways during the day, so there was no reason that he would be there at 3 a.m. The other dude asked if the wooden block belonged to us, as they allegedly found it on the curb outside our B&B. I definitely smelled bullshit, as there was absolutely no reason to do that at 3 a.m. I called for my guys, and the 3 men immediately ran for it. I clued in the guys on the circumstances, and we stayed up until the morning in case they tried anything funny. We decided to report to reception about the employee, but the description I gave them were not synonymous with theirs. They told me that the housekeepers that they hired consist of only females in their 30s or 40s. This sent shivers down our spine as we realized we had let a complete imposter in and out of our rooms while we were out. Luckily, nothing important was lost, and we got out of the situation safely. I can't imagine what would have happened if I didn't wake up that fateful night, as those doors were close to being opened. I was just grateful that that was our last night there. When I was 19, I worked nights at a shitty hotel chain in my hometown, and it was generally pretty chill. You'd get your weirdos and creeps, but I could handle my own, and I got used to it pretty quickly. However, this guy was way worse than anything I had encountered up until that point. It was an average night spent checking guests in, doing laundry, stocking, etc. There were 2 sets of doors at the entrance, the inner one being locked after night shift starts. Dude shows up around 3 a.m. and rings me through the lobby phone set between the 2 doors. Immediately before I could even get my customer service on, he starts frantically demanding I call medical transport, which I didn't really know what he was talking about, but I tried to help him the best I could, asking questions. Eventually I just let him in so I could get a better idea of how to help, but when I do, his whole tone immediately changes. He starts speaking in his monotone voice and has kind of a dead stare. I've never seen eyes so void of emotion, and not to mention, he had no physical signs of injury at all. Obviously, I was freaked out, but tried my best to carry on normally, asking him more questions. After the first 2 questions, he stops answering completely and continues staring. Keep repeating myself, and he's just staring. At this point, I'm pretty fed up with him, and I say, "Alright, I'm gonna call 911 to get you help." He then starts getting frantic again, going between begging me not to call and saying, "They won't let me go, and I can't go back there." I tell him that I'm not really sure how to help him if he won't let me call emergency services, so he needs to leave. He didn't even seem to need medical assistance in the first place. The guy goes right back to ignoring everything I'm saying and staring. Honestly, I should have just called the police right then and there, but I was overwhelmed by him, and getting the police involved is always the last resort for me. So I say, "You can rest here for 20 minutes and try to find an alternative transportation, but then you need to go." I go into the back to watch him on the cameras. 20 minutes goes by, and I come in to tell him that he needs to leave, and he starts arguing nonsensically. I go back into the back in exasperation. The cycle then repeats like for 2 more hours. Finally, I tell him I'm calling the police, to which he replies, "Well, if you're gonna be like that, I'll just leave." Shit was comical at this point. I'm like, "Please do, I've wanted that the whole time." I was done with him, so I was basically yelling. He finally leaves. I did call the cops and reported him too. The freakiest part was, while I was telling my boyfriend about this guy, he recognized him from the description of his creepy ass stare and pulls up his mugshot with charges for rape, aggravated sexual assault, and a bunch of other shit. My then boyfriend worked at a homeless shelter for some years and had seen this guy from time to time. After that, I felt so lucky that he was just a weird, creepy annoyance for me. Who knows what would have gone down in different circumstances. Creepy hotel guy, let's not meet. This happened a few summers ago. My friends and I threw a going away party for our friend that was going to migrate to Canada. We went to this island and it was during non-peak season, so that means that we were the only guests there. We arrived at the island just after lunchtime. A few kilometers away from the resort, there is a small village just near the port. When we arrived to said port, the resort service vehicle was not there. They alerted us that they were going to be late because the vehicle broke down. We decided to stop by the small store and bought some other necessities that we had forgotten to buy in the mainland. There's a group of men around their late 20s that were catcalling us. Our group consists of 5 girls and 4 boys. One of the men catcalling came up to me and asked for my number, and one of my guy friends moved me away from him. Thank heavens. Our service arrived, but he was still staring at me, and to be honest, it creeped me out. When we arrived at the resort, it had cottages that were on stilts. You had to climb up the bamboo ladder to get to your room. It was also made from bamboo, just your typical hut. Even the floors were made from bamboo. The bathroom is separated from the huts and is for common use. We partied and I got tipsy fast because I'm a lightweight. I excused myself from the group and climbed up the cottage to change into my swimwear. My friends really wanted to go island hopping. I was also planning to take a swim in the beach and island hop, just to lessen the buzz. I was not able to change since the room just started spinning. I decided to nap it out. I told my friends to go without me. It was a long debate because they didn't want to leave me alone. but I insisted that they should go. After a few beggings, they went on island hopping without me. When I woke up, it was already around twilight. The resort was quiet. It was a bit dim inside the room. The resort hadn't turned on the lights since the electricity only runs via solar and generator. They only turn on the generator around 7 p.m. I can already feel the hangover. I used my phone's flashlight to help me see. I noticed that the door was slightly ajar. I was sure that it was closed when my friends left. When I was about to close it, the head of the guy from earlier popped out, and he gave me that creepy smile, still asking for my number. I told him to get out, but he was begging for my number. He even used his foot to stop the door from closing. I screamed, and he kept saying in our language, which translates to, "Man, let's fuck." I kept on screaming, calling out for my friends. What the man said still makes me shake. He said, "Your friends haven't arrived yet." He was standing there for hours, watching us. I kept on screaming for the caretakers of the island. I screamed help, and finally saw beams of a flashlight running towards us. He quickly left, and he ran towards the forest just behind the hut. I was shaking to the point that I was unable to stand up. My friends arrived a little later, and the caretakers told my friends about what just happened. They asked for some help of the caretakers and the local chef of the island. They went on a manhunt looking for the guy. Sadly, they did not see him. We left that same night. We transferred to another island with a much more private resort. Several years ago, while on a business trip, I checked into a nondescript hotel that was kind of eerie. The lobby's dim lighting and worn-out carpet hinted at a place long past its prime. Upon entering the elevator to reach my assigned floor, I noticed a man standing in the corner. He appeared disheveled, his clothes wrinkled and stained, his eyes hidden behind thick-rimmed glasses. Darted around the small space, avoiding any form of eye contact. An unsettling feeling washed over me, but I brushed it off as a mere reflection of my own fatigue. Later that evening, as I returned to my room after a long day of meetings, I encountered the same man lingering in the hallway. His presence sent a shiver down my spine, as if he was a specter, always lurking just out of my sight. My unease intensified when he turned his gaze towards me, revealing a hollow stare that seemed to penetrate my soul. Over the course of my stay, the unnerving encounters with this mysterious guest continued. I would catch glimpses of him in my hotel common areas, always alone, always observing his surroundings. It was as if he had no purpose for being there, no agenda other than to sow fear and unease in those unfortunate enough to cross his path. One night, I was unable to sleep. I decided to walk the hotel's deserted hallways, trying to wear myself out. A faint sound led me to the stairwell, where I discovered the door slightly ajar. My curiosity got the better of me, and I cautiously pushed it open. To my horror, I found the unsettling guest huddled in the corner, muttering to himself incoherently. Fear gripped me as I realized the true extent of his unsettling presence. There was darkness in his eyes, a darkness that sent chills coursing through my veins. The air grew heavy with an unspoken threat, suffocating my senses. I retreated silently, praying that I would not be noticed. From that moment on, I avoided any encounters with that stranger. I took precautions to ensure my safety, always mindful of his lingering presence within the confines of the hotel. Every creaking floorboard, every fleeting shadow became a source of terror and a reminder that danger lurked just around the corner. When my business trip came to an end, I hurriedly checked out of our hotel, my relief palpable as I stepped into the outside world. The memory of the unsettling guest, his haunting presence, and the unspoken threat he carried retained etched in my mind as a reminder of the dangers behind the doors of a seemingly innocent place. Always trust your gut and be wary of your surroundings. When I was about 5 and my sister was about 3, we were staying at a Motel 6 that had an outdoor pool that my sister and I were playing in with our mom. My dad was, and still is, a preacher, and he was busy at one of the tables outside working on a sermon. A man at the pool noticed the Bible and used it as an opportunity to ask my dad for counsel. My dad said he would be happy to sit and talk with him. Not too long before that, my mom was getting my sister and I out of the pool and was going to take us up to the room to get bathed and cleaned up for dinner. The man was like, "Well, I'm not comfortable talking out here. Let's go to your room." My dad was like, "Sorry, but no, that's not an option." The guy was like, "You're a pastor. It's your responsibility to make me feel at ease so I can do some real healing." My dad was like, "Again, not possible, but I can meet you at the cafe and I'll buy you a cup of coffee and we can have a good talk." The man started getting frustrated and pushy and saying that the only way he was comfortable talking with my dad was in my dad's room. My dad said, "Sorry, good luck to you. It's not going to happen." Eventually the guy got up and left, but my dad said he was pretty sure that this man was trying to get in our room to do very bad things to our family. We left shortly after that. I was walking to the lobby of the hotel I was staying at, and all of a sudden I hear, "Hey baby." And when I turn around, it's this lady that I have never seen before. She starts talking to me about her and a few of her friends are going to the local cemetery and asked if I wanted to join. She then asked me for my name and said, "I don't know you, but I have to go talk to the hotel because I need to check in." She immediately left. I live part-time in a tourist town, so I'm used to people asking me about directions, things to do, and places to eat, but this encounter set me on edge. Did this lady have ill intentions, or am I just paranoid? Years ago, during a road trip through a remote part of the country, I found myself seeking refuge for the night in a quaint, seemingly harmless hotel. It was nestled between towering trees and isolated from the bustling world. Little did I know that this cute-looking establishment would become the backdrop for a bone-chilling encounter that would forever haunt my memories. As I stepped into the lobby, a sense of foreboding washed over me. The air was heavy, and a musty smell covered the dimly lit space. The receptionist, an elderly woman with a vacant stare, greeted me with a disconcerting smile. I brushed off the unease, attributing it to exhaustion from my long journey. I was assigned to room 413. I made my way down the dimly lit corridors. The faded wallpaper peeled away, revealing the hotel's aging infrastructure. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the distant echo of my footsteps. Uneasiness settled in my gut, but the exhaustion won over, and I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination running wild. As the night wore on, strange occurrences shattered any semblance of comfort. I would hear faint whispers echoing through the corridors, the sound of hushed conversations that grew louder and more distinct when I approached. Each time I reached the door handle, the voices were abruptly ceased, leaving me standing in eerie silence. Inside my room, the atmosphere was suffused with a heavy sense of malevolence. Shadows danced ominously across the walls, and an icy drift crept through the crack of the window. The ancient furnishings seemed to harbor secrets of their own. Every creak of the floorboard sent shivers down my spine, and the constant tapping on the window pane intensified my fear. It was dead of night, sleep eluded me. The room seemed like it was possessed by a life of its own, as if it was watching my every move. Shadows swirled in the corners, faint whispers filled the air, growing louder and more insistent. Unable to bear the torment any longer, I made a hasty decision to flee the hotel. As I rushed down the corridors, my heart was pounding in my chest. The whispers grew louder, and it almost sounded like manic laughter. It was reverberating through the desolate hallways. The receptionist, now absent of her post, seemed to have vanished into the air. I burst through the doors of the hotel into the safety of the night. I'll always remember my stay at 413 and that sinister presence of the hotel. I got in my car and drove to the next town and stayed in a normal hotel for that night. I don't know if I was just on edge, tired, or what, but that place seemed haunted.